بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على عبد الله ورسوله نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. So we're starting a little bit later than usual, just 5 minutes or so, a little bit of time to get set up with the audio and the video equipment today. We should have a video link into the sisters section today. I haven't had a chance to test it, but it is connected, so inshallah ta'ala I hope that we would have some sort of video in the sisters section today. If not, inshallah, then we can obviously test that for next time, but it's all set up this time. We are up to a brand new chapter in this beautiful book, Bulugh al-Maram, by Al-Imam Al-Hafiz Ibn Hajar Al-Asqalani rahimahullah ta'ala. And the chapter that we are up to is Babu Salatil Jama'ati wal Imamah, the chapter of Salah. So we've already in Kitab al-Salah, the Salah of the Jama'ah, the congregational prayer, wal Imamah, and leading the people in prayer. Imamah, being an imam. The chapter of the congregational prayer and being the imam. So after Al-Hafiz Ibn Hajar rahimahullah ta'ala, after having finished with the fard prayer for you as an individual, then he went on to the nafila, the voluntary prayer, the nawafil, for you as an individual. It now makes sense to move on to the next logical step in the process of learning about the prayer, and that is to pray as a jama'ah. And the jama'ah is something which Islam has legislated in all of the fard prayers and some of the nawafil prayers. So Islam has legislated us to pray in jama'ah in all of the fard prayers. Fajr is in jama'ah, Dhuhr in jama'ah, in congregation, Asr in congregation, Maghrib in congregation, Isha in congregation. And some of the nawafil prayers, like al-istisqa, where you pray for rain. And I think that most of you will have experienced the rain prayer. We do have it here in the UAE usually every year, where you will have gone to the masjid and the imam will pray for rain, and we pray in the jama'ah. And salat al-kusuf, the eclipse prayer. And Salatul Taraweeh, which all of you have inshallah experienced, the Taraweeh prayer, the praying as a group in Ramadan, as a congregation in Ramadan. And the Eid prayer, for those who think it's a sunnah. As for those who think it's fard, then in the first place, this is included in the fard, that you pray in the jama'ah. And sometimes the night prayer and the duha prayer, but you don't do that as a regular, or you don't take that as a regular thing. But if sometimes, you stand up at night and maybe one of your children wakes up and they see you praying at night and they come and join you sometimes, as long as it's not an organized, regular thing, there's no harm in the night prayer and the duha prayer from time to time being prayed in congregation. So let's look first of all, because we're in a new chapter, let's first of all look, and the Sheikh Salih al-Fawzan, Hafidhahullah ta'ala, in his explanation that we basically, generally we're relying upon, we don't stick to it 100%, but we base it off of that, and then we jump around where we need to. And the next thing that he deals with are the masalih of the jama'ah. What are the benefits? What are the the things that we benefit, or the things that, you know, some of the wisdom behind the jama'ah. And you know, it's interesting when we talk about wisdoms and we talk about masalih, or benefits or positive consequences, that we as a Muslim, you know, really lie in between two extremes. One extreme is trying to find the reason for every single thing that we do, and trying to understand all of the reasons and trying to, you know, list them comprehensively. Because the reality is, the only one who knows all of the wisdom behind something is the one who created us and the one who legislated this sharia for us, Allah. Our intellect is limited, and so our knowledge of the masalih, the positive consequences of something, or the reasons why we do something, is also limited. At the same time, we don't neglect these things completely. We try to, you know, even though the main reason we do something is because Allah legislated it for us, and we trust that Allah knows best, but still, knowing some of these things are a motivation for us, and also they help us to appreciate the wisdom and the perfection of the divine law. So the first benefit of Salatul Jama'ah, or the first positive consequence that comes about because of Salatul Jama'ah, is Ijtima'ul Kalimah, unifying the Muslims. Islam came to bring unity upon the Quran and the Sunnah. Is an important restriction. Islam didn't come to bring unity at any cost. That's not the way of Islam. For example, when they came to the Prophet ﷺ and they offered him that they would make him a king among them, if only he would just compromise a little bit, he did not accept their offer. And Allah Azza wa Jalla revealed, وَدُّوا لَوْ تُدْهِنُوا فَيُدْهِنُونَ. They want you to compromise so that they will also compromise. He didn't accept. Islam did not come with a message of unity at all cost. But Islam came to unify people upon the principles of Islam, the Book of Allah and the Sunnah, and the principles that they contain. That's what Islam came to unify people upon. And Allah Azza wa Jal praises unity in this regard, in this light, unity upon the Quran and the Sunnah. And Allah Azza wa Jal criticizes disagreement and breaking off and forming, you know, sectarianism, and forming groups and parties and all of this stuff. There's not a single place in the Quran or the Sunnah where Allah Azza wa Jal praises us breaking up into little, you know, groups and being separate. Rather, Allah Azza wa Jal commands us to come together. However, to come together on what basis? وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا. Come together upon the rope of Allah and do not be divided. Allah did not say وَاعْتَصِمُوا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا. Come together and don't be divided. He said come together upon the rope of Allah. So there is something that unifies us, and that which unifies us is the Book of Allah and the principles it contains, and by default the Sunnah and the principles that contains. But there is no doubt that the Jama'ah is a unifying aspect for the Muslims. Instead of everyone is considering themselves, everyone is thinking about themselves, everyone is just off in their own little world, maybe for days and days we would not see any of us, and we would not see each other. We wouldn't see each other. Because for days and days we'd all be, everyone is thinking about himself, nafsi, nafsi, myself, myself. But the Jama'ah allows us to come together and to form together as a single row. There isn't a row for the rich and a row for the poor. And you know, that might sound strange, but until this day, there are churches in the world where there are churches for the rich and churches for the poor. and rows for the rich and rows for the poor, and places for, certain people of a certain color skin, and places for people with other color skin, and places for people who have a certain, position in the society, and places for others. In many religions, look at the caste system that exists in many religions. Hinduism, for example. Islam has none of that. We all pray in the same saf. It doesn't matter if you are the king or you are, the lowest of the people in the land. You come and you pray in the same saf. You come together in the masjid from all different people, different places, different nationalities, different languages, and you stand united. And that is also one of the reasons why we have the salah in Arabic. A lot of new Muslims ask, why do we pray in Arabic? Why can't, why make it hard? Why can't we just all pray in our own language? To unify the Muslims. So I can go to a masjid in Japan, and I can go to a masjid in Canada, and I can go to a masjid in South Africa, and I can go to a masjid in Sweden, all of these different directions of the world. And I can find people praying in the same language, lining up together in the same way. So the Jama'ah is a beautiful way of unifying the Muslims. And we make dua for each other. When we pray in the Jama'ah, the dua that we make, we're asking, for example, As-salamu alayna. May salam be upon us all. Why don't we say in the Jama'ah, As-salamu alayya? And may salam be upon me. Alayna, and all these people who are praying together. And we say that whether you pray on your own or whether you pray in the Jama'ah. But when you pray in the Jama'ah, it includes the people praying with you. And there's no doubt that when you go to any masjid, not everyone is of the same level of iman. So one of the benefits of the Jama'ah, the congregation, is that those who are maybe a little bit struggling in their faith, struggling in their iman, not quite where they should be, they benefit from those who have stronger faith. And they all make dua together, so perhaps Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will accept the dua of that one who is weaker by that one who is stronger. Or because of that one who is stronger. And so we come together, we make dua for each other, and perhaps if Allah Azza wa Jal were to look upon us with His forgiveness, that forgiveness would envelop all the people who came to the Jama'ah, including those who are struggling, including those who have problems in their lives. So the Jama'ah is a fantastic place, and one of the benefits the Shaykh mentions is the benefit of learning. The Jama'ah is the best place, not only just to learn about Islam, but to learn about the prayer. You know what we always tell a new Muslim, we get a lot of new Muslims in KALEMAH Islamic Center, and when they come, we always tell them that as a new Muslim, you need to be praying in the Jama'ah, because this is the best way for you to learn how to pray. Because you're surrounded by people praying, you have the Imam leading you, you can follow the Imam, and even if maybe the people in the rows are not 100% sure, but the Imam is qualified, knows what he's doing, you can follow the Imam, and you can learn how to pray properly and be around people who can help you and teach you, and you can learn. So that's another of the benefits of the Jama'ah. And it's enough to say that most of the Islamic classes and teaching that happen after one of the prayers, vast majority. We pray in Jama'ah, and then we come and learn a hadith, or we come and learn a little bit about a benefit or something we can take home. All of this learning and studying comes from the Jama'ah. From the benefits the Shaykh mentions is that the Jama'ah is further away from the shaitan. And I think almost everyone who is true to themselves will say that their prayer in the Jama'ah is generally, as a rule, better than their prayer that they pray at home. Now that doesn't mean their tahajjud or their voluntary prayer, but when they pray fard kind of on their own, or when they pray the fard prayer as a congregation, generally the fard prayer as a congregation is the time when you are less likely to get whisperings. And again, anyone who has problems in the prayer with whispering and confusion, praying in the Jama'ah is one of the major ways of getting rid of that confusion, because you have a collective validity of the prayer, if that's the right word. Because as an individual praying behind the Imam, your mistakes are not counted against you, providing you do a certain minimum amount. Your mistakes are not counted against you. The Imam's prayer makes up for that. And so you have an opportunity to be sort of further away from the shaitan and the whispering of the shaitan, and your prayer is far more likely to be correct and valid praying behind the imam than it is if you were to pray on your own. And the Prophet ﷺ said, إنما يأكل الذئب من الغنم القاصية أو كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم, the wolf only eats from the lone sheep. So definitely when you're a lone sheep, you are vulnerable to the shaitan. From the benefits of the jama'ah is the social benefits that come outside of the prayer. Just by getting together in the same room, we learn about each other. We find out who our neighbors are. We find out who our, the people who come to our masjid are. We find out about their needs. We find out, we have a chance to meet socially with one another and to keep in touch with one another. And this is something that is a major aim of Islam, that social cohesion, bringing us together for the society and knowing, what the situation of each of us is and what people need and what people are, those who are in difficulty and those who are in need of help and what they, the masjid is a social center in order that, we come together, we pray together, and as a result of that, we have mercy on each other, we find out about one another, we become friends with one another, we probably, meet each other socially outside of the masjid after that because we came together and we met together in the masjid. So that's also one of the benefits of the jama'ah. It also helps to keep you punctual. And particularly, perhaps this is, and I'm not going to suggest this is the only reason, but perhaps this is one of the reasons why the jama'ah is particularly emphasized for the man. Because we are become extremely, easily distracted in terms of time. And people generally, working people in general, working whether male or female, generally people who are working, you see people running around from, left and right and, in every place, and he's driving here and I've got to be here, I've got a meeting here, an appointment here. Praying in the jama'ah helps to keep your prayer punctual and stops you from forgetting your prayers and stops you from delaying them past their time. And this is also a really important principle behind the benefits of the jama'ah. There are other jama'at, other gatherings or congregations, other than the congregation of the 5 daily prayers. Among them are the weekly congregation, which is Jum'ah, and likewise the yearly congregation for the 2 Eids, or the biannual congregation of the 2 Eids, and likewise the once in a lifetime gathering on the day of Arafah, and each one is kind of, even greater than the other. So the Jum'ah, the gathering of the Jum'ah is an even, greater, even bigger gathering than just, and by the size of the masjid. I mean, for the regular Isha prayer, you have 3, 4, 5 saf. At Jum'ah, the masjid might be full to the point where people are struggling to get in the door. So you have that, that gathering that is bigger. And also when we're going to come to the Jum'ah, we're going to hear that it's not the position of Islam that Jum'ah should be held in every masjid. Rather, Jum'ah should be held in one place in the city, unless there is no room, in which case it can be held in another and another and another until the adequate room is. But the basic principle is there is one Jum'ah which gathers everyone in the town or the city in one place. And of course now we have such large cities that that's not practical, but you won't find every masjid that has a Jum'ah in it. You'll see there is a masjid that has and a masjid that doesn't, in order to gather the people together. And then the Eid. The Eid is not every masjid. Again, perhaps now in the cities we have a sort of a dual system, but the idea is you go out to the musalla and maybe 3 or 4 masjids that would normally have a Jum'ah, all of the people will be there in the musalla for Eid. And then the day of Arafah, and you're talking about now, you're getting to talk about millions of people, 1 or 2 or 3 million people gathering together on the plain of Arafah, and each of these is a gathering bigger than the gathering before. So that's kind of an introduction to the value of the congregation, the value of community, and being cohesive in Islam. So we're going to come to our first hadith, inshaAllah ta'ala. عن عبد الله بن عمر رضي الله عنهما أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: صلاة الجماعة أفضل من صلاة الفذ ب27 درجة، متفق عليه. ولهما عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه أنه قال: ولهما عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه ب25 جزءا. وكذا للبخاري عن أبي سعيد وقال درجة. 3 narrations depending on your copy of Bulugh al-Maram. They might be numbered as 3, they might be numbered as 1. The first of them, and they should be 3 separate hadith because they're all from separate Sahaba. And ahadith from separate Sahaba should be considered to be separate. The first from Abdullah ibn Umar radiyallahu anhuma, that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, the congregational prayer is better than the individual prayer by 27 levels. And this hadith is agreed upon by Bukhari and Muslim. And Bukhari and Muslim narrate from Abu Hurairah the same thing, that the congregational prayer is better than the individual prayer by 25 parts. So 27 levels, 25 parts. And Bukhari narrated from Abu Sa'id that the congregational prayer is better than the individual prayer by 25 levels. So we have 27 levels and 25 parts and 25 levels. So this would appear at the beginning to have somewhat of a mushkil in it. Something, a mushkil being an issue in the hadith which needs some balancing out. We need to explain it. Otherwise, we might look at it and think that there is a contradiction. And we know that there is no contradiction in the authentic sunnah. So therefore we need to understand it, to remove this area of confusion which exists within this hadith. So these 3 narrations are about the virtue of the jama'ah. We had 27 levels, we had 25 parts, and likewise we had 25 levels. And parts and levels, the meaning is one. And the proof that the meaning is one is that the 2 narrations of 25, one mentions parts and one mentions levels. The two are the same. So the meaning of 25 levels is 25 times better, 25 pieces, 25 parts better, however you want to say it, but the meaning is 25 times better. And the meaning of that would be that the individual gets the reward of 1 prayer, and the one who prays in the jama'ah gets the reward as though they had prayed 27 prayers or 25 prayers, and that's a huge virtue. So now the question comes, is there actually a contradiction? The scholars unanimously said there is no contradiction, but they differed over why there is no contradiction. And there are lots of ways to explain it. The way that the Shaykh prefers, and I'm going to give you 3 ways. The way that the Shaykh prefers initially is to say that the 25 is found within the 27. And the 25 is a number that fits inside of the 27. And that, the fact that there is a small difference between them, it doesn't make any difference. Some of them said the reward was 25 and was increased to 27. And others said that depends on the quality of the prayer of the person who is praying in the jama'ah, because we all don't pray the same, and so some may get that and some may get the other. And there are lots of ways of looking at that, where you pray, you know, like the sort of, maybe the one who comes and prays the jama'ah in the masjid, in the first row, is different from the one who prays the jama'ah in a musalla. There are lots of, you know, different sort of differences between the two. But one of the main sort of things is that these numbers being close to one another, there is no, you know, major issue with them. There is no major contradiction between the two. And some of the scholars said one came first and the other one came later, meaning that it started at 25 and was increased to 27. The next issue we have to deal with, and this is important, does this fact that the jama'ah prayer is better than the individual prayer indicate that the individual prayer has no sin? And by that I mean, is this hadith a proof that you don't have to pray in jama'ah? It's okay to pray individually. The Shaykh, he says, there is no evidence in this hadith that the jama'ah prayer is not obligatory. Rather, what it tells you is that the individual prayer is valid. That is all you can take from the hadith. You cannot take from the hadith that the jama'ah prayer is only a sunnah. Maybe it is, but that's a separate issue, that's a separate thing. But you can't take it from this hadith. The most this hadith gives you is that the jama'ah prayer, that the individual prayer is still accepted by Allah. Because otherwise you can't say 25 times or 27 times better. If this individual, you know, prayer was not accepted by Allah, it would be infinitely better, because it would be the difference between acceptance and rejection. But it does not mean that there is not a sin involved in it. Like, this hadith does not prove that there is no sin on praying on your own. And the strongest opinion, and I honestly think the more you look at this, and you will see the coming hadith and many ahadith, that there is no doubt in my mind at all that praying in jama'ah is wajib, fardun wajib, and that whoever does not pray in jama'ah, any of the prayers, is sinful. Allahumma, except the person that absolutely cannot, for some, such as the traveler who's traveling on their own, and they go and they cannot find anybody to stand with them in prayer. Other than that, and you will see the ahadith that will come, that it is pretty clear that the jama'ah is obligatory. And from the strongest evidences that the jama'ah is obligatory is that Allah Azza wa Jal commanded you to pray in jama'ah even in a state of war. When the battle is raging and the bullets are flying by your head, you're still commanded to pray in jama'ah. And this is clear in the Quran, that one group puts their shields up and the other group prays behind them, and then they swap over, and one group puts their shields and their weapons up and the other group prays the prayer. If the jama'ah were to be sunnah, there is no way the jama'ah would be legislated at a time when people have arrows or bullets or, you know, rockets or whatever else flying past their heads. There is no way that that would be legislated at that time if it was a sunnah. That's one of the things that the scholars mention. And the other is our next hadith. We're going to come to this, inshallah, our next hadith. وعن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال والذي نفسي بيده لقد هممت أن آمر بحطب فيحتطب ثم آمر بالصلاة فيؤذن لها ثم آمر رجلا فيؤم الناس ثم أخالف إلى رجال لا يشهدون الصلاة فأحرق عليهم بيوتهم والذي نفسي بيده لو يعلم أحدهم أنه يجد أرقا سمينا أو مرمتين حسنتين لشهد العشاء متفق عليه واللفظ للبخاري. This hadith is narrated by Bukhari and Muslim, and the wording is that of the Bukhari. From Abu Hurairah, that the Messenger of Allah ﷺ said, by the one whose hand my soul is in, I had intended to command a person to gather wood, then to command a person to establish the prayer and give the adhan for it, then to command a man to lead the people. Then I would go to a group of men who do not witness the prayer, and they do not come to the jama'ah, and burn their houses down. By the one whose hand my soul is in, if one of them found a piece of bone with meat, a piece of bone with meat, what do you have in that for a piece of, what do you have in for those two in your translation? And for the other? Or two fine sheep's hooves. If one of you found a piece of fat meat, yani arqan is a bone with meat on it. A piece of, like a piece of meat on the bone, fat meat on the bone. Or two sheep's hooves, he would have come to the Isha prayer. This is agreed upon, and the wording is that of Al-Bukhari. This hadith is from the clear evidences for the obligation of praying in the jama'ah, that the Prophet ﷺ intended to command three things. The first thing that he would command is for wood to be gathered. The second thing that he would command is for the adhan to be given for the prayer. The third thing that he would command is for a man to lead the people in the prayer, and then he would go and burn the houses down of the men who didn't come to the masjid. This is no doubt an extremely serious thing. Some people have a doubt, a shubha, a confusion in this. And they say, but the Prophet ﷺ didn't do it. So isn't this a proof that it's okay? We have two answers to that. The first is the ham of the Prophet ﷺ, the intention of the Prophet ﷺ to do something in itself indicates that that thing must be a huge sin. And for him to have intended, to made a direct intention to burn down the houses of the people who do not come to the prayer in jama'ah, it shows you the seriousness. It shows you the seriousness of that sin. That is the first thing. The second thing, so it shows you the seriousness of the sin because he intended. The second thing is he told us why he didn't do it. In some of the narrations, it tells us that the reason that the Prophet ﷺ didn't do it is because of the women and the children who would have been burnt in the houses. Not because of the men, and not because Allah gave them a ruqsa, or Allah said to them that it's okay, you can stay, I've forgiven you, but because of the women and the children would lose their homes. Not because of the men. So yet again, there is an evidence that the only thing that stopped him from burning the houses down was that those women and children would lose their homes. Otherwise, he would have burnt the houses down. And this is Nabiur Rahmah, the Prophet of mercy. This is the merciful Prophet, the one who came to as a mercy for mankind. And he wants to burn down your house because you don't come to the jama'ah. That is a very serious thing. And then the Prophet ﷺ explains that if one of them were to find arqan samina, an arq is as we said, it's a bone with a piece of meat, a fat meat, a piece of fat meat on the bone. Something very small. And if he were to find mirmatain, now mirmatain, I actually think the translation might be wrong here in the book, because I think it is a rib. It's the meat that is between the ribs. Now neither of those, basically if you were to find two ribs with a piece of meat in between, this is the mirmatain hasanatain, two ribs with a piece of meat. If one of them were to find just a bone with a bit of fat on it, or two ribs with a little bit of meat in between, he would have come to Isha. And yet all of this reward he's told about, and he doesn't come to the Isha prayer. So it is not permissible to miss the Jama'ah unless you have an excuse. And we're going to see to the extent that the companions took this, that if one of them was sick, he would have two of his companions carry him and drag him on his feet to the masjid so he could stand in the prayer. That is how the companions used to consider the Jama'ah to be. But I want to make something a little bit clear, and that is the issue of the difference between Jama'ah and masjid. Right now we're talking about the Jama'ah, we're not talking about the masjid. Jama'ah means praying as a congregation, as a group. There is another separate mas'ala about the adhan and whether you have to come to the masjid. But right now the punishment we're talking about is for the one who doesn't pray in the Jama'ah. Now obviously if you live next to the masjid, your Jama'ah is the masjid. But there comes another issue. What about if there's not a masjid near? Can I pray in a musalla? Can we gather all of our neighbors together? What about in the countries where the masajid are very few and far between? That is a different, separate issue. We will come to it, inshaAllah ta'ala, and we'll deal with it in its time. But right now, we're using this hadith, and this hadith could be a proof for the masjid as well, but we're using this hadith specifically to talk about praying in the congregation. But this hadith in itself indicates that it's not enough for a person just to make a congregation in the house with his family. Because it could be said about those people in those houses, how do you know he's not making a jama'ah with his wife and his children in the house? But yet still the Prophet ﷺ wanted to burn his house down. So that also is an indication, we can use it in a separate instance to talk about the obligation of going to the masjid and praying the jama'ah in the place where all the people are gathered, not just praying, you and your family in a particular place. But we're talking about at the moment we're talking about the jama'ah prayer and not the masjid as such. There are some other evidences in this hadith which are fiqhi evidences. And one of the issues we have in this is the permissibility of destroying wealth as a punishment. So it is permissible for the judge to destroy part of a person's wealth in punishment for something that they have done. And this is a mas'ala khilafiyya among the scholars, because some of the scholars said it's not permissible. Some of them said it's not permissible because that wealth is a blessing you've been given from Allah. You can, imprison them, you can, but you can't, you can, seize their wealth and maybe give it to someone. You can't just destroy their wealth. You can't just, take a bundle of notes and just, burn it. But this hadith is one of the evidences, and we haven't got to this issue yet, but it's just interesting to point out how deeply the fuqaha look at these issues, the scholars of fiqh, that they go so deep to say that this hadith is an evidence for the permissibility of destroying part of someone's wealth as a punishment for something that they have done. And that's that we can talk about on the topic when we come to the topic of punishments. If Allah Azza wa Jal blesses us to get that far in the book, then we can talk about this evidence here the permissibility of destroying part of a person's wealth as a punishment for something that they've done. The Shaykh is a bit more precise about it, and he says, this also contains an evidence that the places of evil which prevent people from doing good or cause people to do evil, then one of the options available to the sultan, to the person in authority, is for him to destroy that place. So if there is a place that people are gathering to do evil things, it's permissible for the sultan to bulldoze it down. And it's allowed for him, and in some cases it may be wajib for him to do so. So now we come to the opinions of the scholars regarding Salatul Jama'ah. The first opinion is that it is fard ayn upon every Muslim for the men who have reached puberty and are able to attend. That is the first opinion. The second opinion is that it is fardu kifaya, that it is a collective obligation. As long as people come to the masjid, it doesn't matter if one or two people don't come. As long as there are rows in the masjid, it doesn't matter that everyone should come. And for this they use the first hadith as an evidence. And this is one of the two opinions of the Shafi'iyya and one of the two opinions of the Hanafis and the opinion of the Malikis. And the third opinion is that it is a sunnah. And again, they used the ahadith that speak about the prayer being better, and they said that this indicates that it is a sunnah, and this is also one of the opinions of the Shafi'iyya and one of the opinions of the Malikiyya and one of the opinions of the Hanafis. However, when we come to the ayat and we come to the ahadith, we see that the opinion that it is fardu ayn is stronger than the opinion that it is a collective obligation, or the opinion that it is a sunnah. And as we said, this is a separate issue from praying in the masjid, which has a separate set of opinions. Then those who said that it is wajib differed among themselves. Is it a condition for the validity of the prayer or not? In other words, is your prayer invalid if you don't pray in the jama'ah, or is your prayer valid? And we said that the correct opinion, or first of all, they said the evidence for this is the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, "Man sami'a an-nida'a falam yajib fala salata lahu illa min udhr." Whoever hears the adhan and doesn't answer it, he has no prayer unless he has an excuse. And they said the words no prayer means that his prayer is invalid. The hadith is sahih, this hadith. Whoever hears the adhan and doesn't answer it, he has no prayer unless he has an excuse. However, when we gather all of the ahadith together, it seems to me, and Allah Azza wa Jal knows best, that the opinion that the salah is invalid is not the correct opinion. And the correct opinion is that the salah is valid, but that the person is sinful for missing the jama'ah. As for if they pray on their own, their salah is still valid. And we mentioned the evidence of Salat al-Khawf as well. How do we then respond to this first hadith about the one being better than the other? As we said earlier, we said that something being better doesn't indicate necessarily that the other one is not sinful. And Allah Azza wa Jal, if you look at the ayat of the Quran and the ahadith, There are many, many things that talk about it being better for them. Ayat like, if they obeyed Allah, it would be better for them. In the ayat, I'm trying to think of the ayat off the top of my head, but the ayat, they talk about things like, if they obeyed Allah, it would be لَكَانَ خَيْرًا لَهُمْ, it would be better for them. Does that mean that it's okay to disobey Allah and it's okay to obey Allah? Well, there's no doubt that one being better than the other does not negate the fact that there is sin in the lesser one. And Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. وعن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه أنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أثقل الصلاة على المنافقين صلاة العشاء وصلاة الفجر ولو يعلمون ما فيها لأتوهما ولو حبوا متفق عليه. From Abi Hurairah radiallahu anhu, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, the heaviest prayer on the hypocrites is Salatul Isha and Salatul Fajr. And if they knew what was in them, meaning the reward that was in them, they would have come to them even if they crawled. And this is agreed upon by Bukhari and Muslim. The hardest prayer for the munafiqeen. Now, in general, the munafiqun are of two types. There are two types of nifaq. It's important to understand this. Important point in Aqeedah. There are two types of nifaq. Nifaqun i'tiqadi and nifaqun amali. Nifaq in belief and nifaq in actions. Okay? Nifaq in belief is to conceal disbelief in your heart and show belief on your limbs and your tongue. So a person comes and says, I'm a Muslim, behaves like a Muslim, comes to the prayer, says the Shahada. This person in their heart does not believe in Islam at all. But they are hiding the fact that they are not a Muslim and showing the fact that they are a Muslim. This is nifaq in belief. And then there is nifaq in action. And nifaq in action is for a person to be a Muslim, but to have certain attributes of the hypocrites in the actions that they do. So what are some of the attributes of the hypocrites? When they speak, they lie. Many of us lie. But we lie, we still believe in Allah. We don't conceal kufr in our heart. So this is not nifaqun i'tiqadi. This is not the nifaq of belief, but it is the nifaq of action. It's a resemblance to the munafiqeen in actions, breaking promises and so on. Which does this hadith refer to? The most obvious meaning is that it refers to the munafiqeen who are guilty of nifaq in belief. That their characteristic is that they find it hard to come for Isha and for Fajr. However, we say the hadith extends to both. Originally, the hadith is intended towards the munafiqeen who are guilty of kufr. That is the munafiqeen who conceal disbelief and show belief. However, like anything, nifaqun amali is a resemblance to the munafiqeen in your actions, which does not take you outside of the religion of Islam. And it may be that if one of us finds it hard for Fajr or finds it hard for Isha, then this person has an element of nifaq in them. They are not disbelievers. But what they have in them is a resemblance to the munafiqeen, which is a major sin and something that needs to be removed from them if they find it, and that doesn't mean you don't find it hard to wake up. I mean, people find it hard to wake up. But you really don't like coming to Fajr and Isha. Fajr, you don't like it. You don't like coming to Fajr. You try to do anything you can avoid to come to Fajr. And that a person in that state has an element of the munafiqeen in their actions. That doesn't mean they're a hypocrite. That does not mean they are a kafir. What it means is they have a part of the actions. They resemble the munafiqeen in their actions. And that's a sign that they need to make tawbah, they need to turn to Allah, and they need to realize the value, because what does the hadith say? If they knew the reward that was in them, they would come even if it was crawling. And I think, insha'Allah ta'ala, we will stop there, bi-idhnillahi ta'ala, because I think it's late enough and we had a little bit of a late start. But insha'Allah ta'ala, we can continue next time and try to understand these things. But I think it's really important just to note that we've learned something today that's practical for all of us. And that is the importance of praying in the jama'ah. And that jama'ah for most of us is the masjid. In very rare circumstances, there may be times when you cannot reach the masjid, in which case even reaching the masjid and praying in the second jama'ah, or going to the musalla and praying in the jama'ah with some people, this is what you have to do. It's not enough that, I slept in for Fajr 5 minutes, I'm not going to make the salam, I will just pray at home. You need to make sure that you're praying in the jama'ah in every circumstance. So if you wake up, except for the fact that somebody wakes up, and it's 10 o'clock in the morning or something, he's not going to find a jama'ah to pray Fajr with him. But somebody who's 5 minutes late to the masjid, go to the masjid. Perhaps you'll find a person who came late like you, and you can make a jama'ah. Or go to the musalla, and you might find some people who are going to do that. Likewise, you should be thinking, if you're at the stage where you're praying on your own at work, try to organize a jama'ah. Even if it is just a few of you at work and you make a little prayer room. And brother was telling me today, Jazallahu khairan, that he started a little prayer room at work, and before long they had to move the prayer room to the upper floor, because when he came nobody was using the prayer room. And after they started making a little jama'ah of 2 people, what happened is the jama'ah became so big that they had to relocate them to another floor, because all of the Muslims started coming to the jama'ah. Look at the reward of that. من سن في الإسلام سنة حسنة فله أجرها وأجر كل من عمل عليها إلى يوم القيامة. Whoever establishes a good example will have the reward of it and the reward of everyone who acts upon it until the Day of Judgment, without their reward being decreased in anything. So, maybe you're at work, you pray on your own, try to stop, try to sort of get it down to almost never that you pray completely by yourself. And that you have a situation where you're almost, unless it's the rarest of circumstances, you wake up at, like I said, 8 in the morning or 9 in the morning and you missed Fajr, there's nothing you can do about that. But try whatever you can to pray in the jama'ah. The only exception I would say to that is if you are going to miss the prayer time by looking for the jama'ah. Like, for example, it's Maghrib and you're in an unfamiliar place, or maybe not Maghrib, maybe it's only a few minutes before sunrise and you have only 2 or 3 minutes to pray Fajr. At this point you cannot go and look for the jama'ah, because by the time you find the jama'ah, the time for the prayer will be over. In this time you have no choice but to pray on your own. But apart from these rare circumstances, you really need to be praying in the jama'ah in the overwhelming majority of circumstances. And we'll add to that, and we're going to learn next week, that the masjid is also obligatory if you hear the adhan. If you hear the adhan, the masjid is also obligatory. If you don't hear the adhan, then the jama'ah is obligatory anyway. That never stops being obligatory. But if you hear the adhan, not only is the jama'ah obligatory, but the jama'ah in the masjid is obligatory. So again, that adds another element onto it. You hear the adhan, you need to go to the masjid and you need to pray in the masjid. So some of the scholars were asked, what about the one who prays in the musalla? He said, if it is extremely difficult for you to go to the masjid, for example, your workplace don't let you out, or we have an example with schools. The schools don't let the children out of the gates of the school. They hear the adhan, but they're not allowed to leave the gates of the school. Then in this case, they can pray in jama'ah together, and they don't leave because they can't leave the school, or the employee doesn't let you out of the workplace, or you can't physically get, sometimes in Dubai, the masjid might be a stone's throw, but it's across a busy road, you just can't get there, so you have a musalla on the other side where the people pray. We hope that this is acceptable, inshallah. But in general, all of us should be aiming for the jama'ah, and almost always we should be aiming for the masjid as well, specifically the masjid. And Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. You guys might have to excuse me a little bit with the Q&A today. We have a few things to do, but inshallah we'll catch you guys on the way out, inshallah, as we walk out. We'll walk out, and on the way out we'll talk, inshallah. Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. Wa salatu salam ala nabiyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een.